You know, I gave the Giants a C plus here. And I've said this before. I feel for the Giants because they tried, right? They've tried. They made calls for Matthew Stafford. They had a contract offer to Matthew Stafford. They made calls for Geno Smith. So they tried to get better significantly at the quarterback position. Heck, there were rumors that they even made calls to the Tennessee Titans to get up to number 1 overall to see if there was any way that they could get up there to trade for Cam Ward. So, and ultimately, they're not able to do that. They get aggressive. They still get a quarterback. They go get Jackson Dart at the back end of the first round. They didn't pay a ton to be able to have to do that. So I think that's a little bit of a win there for them. Holland and Adebo, I think, really good adds to a secondary that really struggled. I thought the draft was good, pending on like what you think of Jackson Dart. I think the rest of the draft was pretty good there. A little worried that they didn't do more on the offensive line, but I think that they have some chips on the table there, and they tried to make some upgrades on the offensive line. It was Greg Van Roten wasn't their first plan, and I think the reason why I ended up just giving the Giants a C plus is not because they didn't try to make these moves, they didn't get them done. Right, I was told that, like, all right, bringing back Greg Van Roten, who's in his mid-30s now, like, that wasn't plan A, that wasn't plan B, that was kind of what they had to do. It's like, all right, well, what's the reason for that? Why are you not getting these deals done? These players probably don't want to come and play in New York right now with all the uncertainty that's there. And then with the quarterbacks, yeah, you're trying to make swings, and I give you, I give you your props for trying to do that, but ultimately, you didn't get a deal done for Geno. You did not get a deal done for Matthew Stafford. And obviously you weren't going to be able to get up to number 1 overall with how the Titans think of Ward. So I didn't want to be overly harsh on the Giants, but for as much as I want to give them credit for like, hey, I think you probably had the right original plans, they didn't really manifest. A lot of their plans to get significantly better this year outside of the draft, which they did, and then I want to praise the secondary too. So maybe B- given expectations of what was going to be for this team. I ended up going with a C+, but that's sort of the range of what I thought for the Giants, who I don't have a lot more faith in for them in 2025, and I think we could be talking about a new regime for them going into 2026.
Yeah, see, that's the tough part, right? Is this entire offseason was kind of executed in the scope of Joe Schoen and Brian Daboll being A, desperate to win, and B, desperate to find an answer at quarterback, right? Now, I do think when you look at the players they got, you could make this a little higher, right? Because what Russell Wilson and Jameis Winston even is way better than the quarterback room they had last year. So then you add Jackson Dart into that. If he's their guy, then cool. Then this could work long term. But I think you look at some of the other guys. You mentioned Paulson Adebo and Javon Holland, and let's not forget the third overall pick, Abdul Carter, going into a defensive line now, and Darius Alexander later in the draft. This could be a nasty defensive line with Carter added into it, with Brian Burns, with Dexter Lawrence. I think you're talking about a defense that got a whole lot better this offseason. But those are the two big questions. When you have quarterback questions and offensive line questions, that can kill your whole team. Absolutely. We've seen that time and time again. So it is kind of an in-between thing. I think the grade gets raised if you're a big fan of Jackson Dart. Neither of us, we both kind of have our questions about Dart and his translatability to the NFL, but that's what it's going to come down to. And the survival of this regime is going to be based on what they can do with Jackson Dart and if they can turn him into a franchise quarterback. Otherwise, you're right. It's actually a pretty talented roster that could be looking at a new staff next year.
Yeah, so maybe I'll elevate this into the B range, but that's sort of the conversation of where we're at with the Giants. I agree. A lot of it hangs on the Jackson Dart draft and sort of what you thought of him, at least if you're judging it right now, if you're giving it a grade right now.